Okay, mm, we are here to talk about Brandy. I have read the book. I actually finished reading the book 2 weeks ago. Why it took me this long to come and talk to you, that's a very good question. I I think some of the issues that I do have with Brandy doesn't clean up from the book. Um, there are a few things that I will talk as highlights. I will say that there are some aspects of the book that does make me realize that part of the problem that people have with Brandy and her ability to seem inauthentic is really probably how she struggles with the media and so I can understand that. I mean, this is the same thing that you have with a lot of musicians of that era that tends to be traumatized about being mistreated in the public. And so therefore they don't know how to balance that with being very forward and open. So I can understand where she's coming from that perspective. Um, but I have some, but the other issues that people have with her is that she's doesn't seem to be completely honest. And to be fair, she doesn't need to give us honesty or she doesn't need to tell her whole story or anything to that effect. Maybe the public's the problem that we demand too much and we demand to be too informed about people's lives that we feel like they owe us something when in fact they don't owe us anything. But, the thing is that unfortunately, in order to protect her brand, she had to, well, I don't, the truth will come out eventually in the hopes of protecting her brand. And so therefore it leads to these kind of commentary about she's not honest. So I struggled personally with reading some of this because I felt that, I kind of rolled my eyes in some areas because, you know, because of what she decides to keep in and keep out. So let's start from the beginning. Mm. Another major critique of the book is that time, like one plus one was not adding to two. And so I think that what would make this book better is if she would have broke it down by album, because that's kind of how it felt that she was living from album to album and what she did in between. And if she would have broke it down that way, then I think it would have made the reading of it a little bit differently. Instead it's organized linear. It's trying to go from how she started to how she ended. And in fact, what she really wants to do is to do if you chunked it by album to album, I think that you would have a better digestible aspect of the book. So anyway, that's my advice actually, instead of trying to bring this by um different phase, she calls it phases, and she calls like the chapters of this kind of different phase. I just don't and have different titles. I think that she should just do this based on um albums, first album. So how do we get to the first album? And she talks about her love for Whitney Houston and and that and how she was striving to become a music artist. I did not realize how intertwined she was with Immature. So I thought that was interesting. I did find it fascinating how her mother was involved in the brand, and I struggled with the concept that her mother would just kind of let her hang out. In the same way, I get it where you're hanging and collaborating with other musical artists, but I don't quite grasp the concept of having my daughter just hang out with these men and whatnot. So there was, the incident where she throws the book. I thought, she gives a more detailed explanation of how she ended up throwing the book. One of them was physically trying to touch her inappropriately or did touch her inappropriately. And so I'm like, my bad, Brandy. I think, context matters and, sorry for your eye, but keep your hands to yourself. And there are moments where, like when she did her first TV show, Tia, and how Tia publicly in front of a studio audience was talking about her getting her first menstrual cycle and thought that was a joke, had the audience laughing at her and stuff. I was like, yo, stab, stab, stab. And um and the fact that she had to tell her mom, hey, she doesn't like me, and that's when she started coming to set. I feel that she should have been coming to set anyway. She was too young, and it feels that she gave her too much freedom to be around people in the industry in general. And I don't want to give a comparison, but when you look at when you read Tina Knowles' book, she makes it pretty clear, like you not taking two steps without me or your dad. Like somebody is always going to be present. And the thing I took away from Tina Knowles' book was I could not figure out how she was able to feed into everyone and be as present as she was for everyone. And some parents couldn't or wouldn't. We don't I don't fully know Kelly's story, but the fact that Kelly was living with Beyonce and the fact that Tina wouldn't let Kelly out of her sight just as much as Beyonce out of her sight, as much as the girls out of her sight. I think that that's telling, and it really prevented Beyonce and Kelly and Michelle essentially from being mistreated. And that's what I think, unfortunately, did not happen for Brandy. And I don't quite grasp why the parents did not feel that sense of urgency. Um, I don't get that at all. And so you end up with the first album coming out, and um, and then you end up with the second album that drops. And in between the first and the second album, she is a teenager and she becomes, I guess the album drops at 19. Yeah, she's 19. And what I don't understand about this is that this album is about her breakup with Wanye or whatever. And this is the Boys to Men fiasco. He was too old for her. And I know that in context, older men, when she's a bit older than me, and a lot of as much as I think about this, and I've been talking about this with friends and even my husband, um, a lot of the high schoolers, uh, especially when a girl hit 16, they would date older men, and they'd have different men coming up, pulling up to the high school, picking them up, and nobody would bat an eye. And I still feel though that even when this was happening, I was thinking about my own high school experience and how, granted, all of us dated somebody who was out of high school. And this almost became a thing. Like how, you're dating somebody who's in high school, kind of a thing. But I still feel that age matters. And 16, 19, I can kind of get with at that time. Um, but once you hit 20, I don't know, it just seems odd. And I also think that my high school is huge on alumni. So we even have an alumni week where a lot of us come back. And so because of that, we even had a day, they don't do this anymore, where you would have we had an alumni fair where they'd have food and whatever that comes onto campus. And so it's the same day as Walk the Halls, pep rally, and it would be just like an all day fair. Um, I think it's cool, but I also thought like, yo, this is in November and it's usually around maybe like a week or two before Thanksgiving, turkey tussle, right? So I just struggled with uh how can some of these people come back? And then, you're supposed to be in college. And then if you were coming back at around the time, just like on a regular Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, why are you hanging out at a high school? But a part of me, it didn't somewhat, we kind of made those comments, but then some of us would say the reason why it wasn't that terrible that people were doing this is because we had a school that was really focused on alumni and keeping like this alumni body going. And so it kind of low key didn't make it too far-fetched that you'd have people out of high school hanging out at a high school. But um yeah, but what I didn't get from this as I was going back to Brandy, he was too old. And I'm not convinced that the mom was um was okay with the relationship. It I'm convinced that she did hide it. I am convinced that by the time that the parents found out about it, it ran its course. The relationship, but they've already been together for over a year. Now, as much as I was kind of on the fence about this guy, um, when he did that Breakfast Club interview and said that she was old enough to get it, it definitely did not make me feel any, it didn't make me feel like he was the good guy in this. But at the same token, I do think that working and being in the environment that she's in, dating somebody older isn't extremely far-fetched. But I don't know. I see, I still am not, I don't, what I don't understand is the mom, like when the guy called the house and asking for Brandy, and she gave him the phone, she gave her the phone, was that, and then they're like, oh, you can hang out. And I'm just kind of torn as if that's something that I would do. And if I did do it, then I'd probably put it on speaker. Um, I guess I mean, because he didn't call her to collab, he called her to hang out. And I just think that that would be a little suspicious. And if she's like, oh, can I hang out? Um, why? I think this is where we kind of differ. Are we collabing or what are we doing? With that being said, the whole album was supposed to be about this relationship. Now, I really like that Never Say Never album, but as I listened to it, because I listened to it on the way to San Diego, so I listened to the whole thing, and I discovered like there's a lot of songs on that album that I really loved. But I think the album would have been better if you would have cut it. There's about, especially near the end, there's about 4 or 5 songs on that album that made it too long. So I still love that album. It's still my favorite album. I still like that more than I like Full Moon. But I still think that the album was a little bit too long. Um, and then I realized that in my head, I think I stopped it. I can let me pull up the album list. But I do think that I stopped the album. Um, let's see. I think I stop it at put that on everything because I don't like I do it for you. Everything I do, I don't. I'm not that big, so I don't listen to. And maybe I did listen to Happy, but I know for sure. 14, 15, and 16, One Voice, Tomorrow, and Everything I do it for you. I absolutely do not listen to those. So I just kind of I thought it was and I also do not listen to Truthfully. I do not like Truthfully at all. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I think that they could have cut this album down by at least 4 songs, and that album would have been a lot better. Moving on. Um, we get beyond that. She ends up in another relationship that happens to end up becoming a uh an abusive relationship. So that's terrible. And um, you know, we don't know who the guy is, and whatever. And so it becomes the inspiration to her Full Moon album. See, do you see the trend? If you would have done this by albums, I think that this would have been a really good aspect. Then by that's the third album. The fourth album, between Full Moon and the fourth album, she gets pregnant. And she comes up with this idea that she says it's her idea that she pretends to be married. This is where you lost me. Because she doesn't mention the reality show that she taught. The reality show was about her giving birth. the lead up to giving birth. So we saw her and this guy who seems to be not interested in her at all. Um, that reality show, the way that she talks about how much he loves her in the book is not the impression that any of us who watched that reality show got. He'd walk ahead of her, and then somehow she talks about how he went on the Wendy Williams TV show and talked about how they weren't really in a relationship. She was a side chick. He had a whole relationship with somebody else who he had a baby with. And all of this was just to keep a facade and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking, I'm sorry. So your main chick was comfortable with you doing a whole reality show with Brandy masquerading as being married with a baby on the way? And Brandy's the side chick? You know, as much as you're trying to make it seem as if that Brandy is trifling, yo, you're trifling. And the fact that the other woman, your quote unquote main girlfriend, was cool with it, I mean, she's trifling. So, and then why embarrass Brandy this way? So she claims she lost all these endorsement deals. And part of me, okay, the endorsement deals would not have been lost if you didn't really, in my opinion, fake being married. Just be, I'm having a baby. And now, granted, I know the time period is different to where someone who had this squeaky clean image getting pregnant out of wedlock defies squeaky clean image, but I just think that you could have rolled this into a different perspective because not only did you have that reality show, you went on Oprah. We were there. Um, and unfortunately, this followed you um as to be the person who is inauthentic, a liar. And people point to that particularly as the thing that's inauthentic and lying. And and as I was reading the book, she made it appear that her daughter was extremely young, like as a baby. So then I started to Google. I was like, wait a second, the timeline's not timelining because when that TV show came out versus Wendy Williams was nowhere near on television. It was years later that Wendy Williams came on, and I was right. So her baby had to be like 4 or 5 years old. I mean, of course, in my mind, that's still a baby, but technically not a baby, and it's not a toddler either. So whatever. I mean, that to me is just I actually blame the editor. No, it's a side person who's writing the book. They should have been like, look, take the language out that insinuates that the babe that your son thought child is little, um, that is toddler age or baby or toddler age. She could talk, she could walk, she has a backpack, that kind of a thing. But I don't blame that on Brandy. I blame that on um her co-writer. And then I think the other larger takeaway, I mean, people have been talking about her issue with Dark Child and her sound with Dark Child and that kind of a thing. I mean, that's cool, but I think that eventually people are going to need new sounds and then she talks about how some of her music she wasn't getting first top space for so her the best songs that Dark Child and others were getting they were giving to somebody else. And I mean, I could see that. But at the same token, there are some songs I was like, I don't know if I'd see Brandy's song on that. And then even when Dark Child was like, yo, I'm going off, instead of me making these songs for you, I could just go off and make, X amount of songs with Beyonce and do super, super well. And I mean, that was rough. That was rude for sure. But I think a bigger question that I took away from the second half of the book, or the last third of the book, was um Brandy's last few albums, according to her, aren't successes. Definitely, let's put it this way, definitely don't meet the same level of success as her first four albums. How about that? And yeah, first four albums. And I would say that even though she's in a deeper, like her music has evolved and she has new facets of her music, I think there's a few things happening. So, um, what happens, first off, there's not that many artists that are able to evolve and improve over time. So that's an anomaly. And there are not that many artists that stay consistently. Um, and how we digest music is different than what it used to be. So I think that should be also acknowledged here too. So Brandy has diehard fans, and for whatever reason, her diehard fans do not digest her newer sound as much as her older sound. I personally enjoy Brandy more as an actress than I do it than I do her music. And I thought that because this book made me go back and listen to a lot of her music. Was not a fan of the first album. I thought it was okay. It was her second album, Never Say Never, that stood out to me. Full Moon is definitely the next one that stands out to me. And her last two albums definitely were not for me. And I will admit that I could have gave it more of a try. I could have listened to it more than once or twice. I don't know if I listened to it twice, so let me be truly authentic by saying more than once. But I would argue, though, I prefer, again, her in the acting space. And um, I think I think she just thrives more on screen in general. But I know that that's not her passion. And I think that for her, it makes it really difficult in general for her to get like her stride going for her music. And it has to be somewhat discombobulating. And you can hear that at the end of the book where, you know, as optimistic and hopeful as she is about what her next is, you can hear her considering, like, I'm not sure what my next would be. I mean, sure, it's probably going to be in acting. Sure, it's probably going to be the fuse of acting and music. I do think that there's been some missteps, such as when she did that TV show with Eve. I think that she could have came out with a little bit more music then. I think, but I will say that I Eve really messed that up for them only because, she wanted to have a baby and everything else. And so I get that, but not having Eve on that show, I think was a mess. And then the show kind of devolved and the writing kind of just went all haywire. But that was a terrible fumble, and that's not a Brandy fumble. That is a writer, whoever the writer and the producer of that show, they fumbled that enough to where it really missed. It could have made a an a good second launch. What I think would be good for Brandy at this point, Broadway is fine, but what I think would have been a nice is if she can find another role, like another movie role that is music aligned. That would be a nice little launch for her. I know that she did a tour, but that also tour could have launched with another song. Um, they could have launched a duet again. I know that they did one with Ariana Grande because she redid their old song, but I'm talking about a new song because they were supposed to do a new song, a newer song that they talked about in the book. But I was like, yo, I don't remember them being in another duet. But it never transpired. But I'm saying that they could have done that, had a new, not go around talking about music and then doing um the tour. No, you should have had something already. And I think there are some levels of missed opportunity, but I wonder if there's the same, not that there's not the same drive, but I wonder if there's a sense of hesitancy because she has launched some music that had not been as well received. And you go where you are most comfortable, appreciated, and acting, and then it feels like this tour was a bit of a safe space for her, which is fantastic, right? So if you, and maybe music is something you have to guide into, but I think that there have been some missed opportunities in all of this. That's my opinion. I think it's a good read. I think it's a way better read than Eve's book. Eve's book was terrible. But I think that this was a good read to start a conversation about, um, you know, artists who are bigger than life. Why is that not sustainable? Why? I think, I, why is it not sustainable? I do also see like I said, there's a lot of this book that she left out. She left out a lot of the drama, which is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it is a thing. And um, yeah, she left out the drama about a number of issues, especially when it comes to uh, especially when it comes to her brother, when it comes, she kind of minimized a lot of the drama. Um, she has another sibling that we don't have, that's missing from the book. And it's really, I'm not sure necessarily it's her story to tell. Uh, as much as it could be, if they don't have a relationship with the sibling, then there is no story to tell. She also, we also miss out on reputation. And, I wonder if it, I don't know. It feels like you do walk away thinking, hmm, maybe some of this is, maybe some of this is the necessity in her focus on being a mother and also her focus on being um focus on being a mother and her focus on dealing with the trauma so uh of being a child artist. And maybe that's the connector that we're not necessarily seeing. Anyway, that's what I'm getting. It's an interesting read. I highly do recommend you reading the book. I thought it was she deals with the fact that she had been told a number of times that she's not pretty enough. Um, and she deals a lot with her weight and having um, eating disorder, and the whole pressure of being who she is and the pressure of trying to kind of become this larger than life character. And what does that necessarily mean for a young girl who has to kind of grow into your body, grow into yourself? And, so I thought that that's an important read for sure. And how do you understand yourself and not have to deal with the pressure of trying to be with someone else, be and trying to date, and how can people accept you for you? So I think all of those are some really good questions that I thought that they do a good job at assessing in the book. So like I said, it's a good book. It's a good starter. There, it doesn't feel complete, but again, it doesn't have to be.